Hello, everyone, and welcome to our college football special, fourth edition of this particular show. I am the analyst at the Analyst32 on Twitter. Thank you for watching. We're going to start things off with the ugly results from this past week, week 3. To start things off here, UConn almost upsets Missouri 6-9. 6-9. Awkward jokes aside, Mizzou and SEC squad really shouldn't be having this much trouble with the team out of the American Conference. UConn has not been that impressive all year. They really haven't been a strong team in a couple of years. So to see this out of Missouri is very questionable. It's another rough game for an SEC squad. Speaking of SEC squads having trouble, Auburn is having one heck of a year. They struggled against Louisville. They struggled last week. And on top of that, this week they finally stumble. And in stumbling, they stumble in a big way. They lose to LSU in a huge loss, 45-18 at LSU, which winning a game at LSU is no easy feat. But we're coming to a point where Auburn really needed to show something, and their first game in the SEC, or at least against an SEC foe like this, with a prolific running game such as this out of Fournette, who ended up having 19 carries, 228 yards, and 3 touchdowns in a standout game, who's really starting to push himself for the Heisman this particular year. Auburn really needed to show more, and they did not, and they got smacked in the face. And another ugly result, which comes in the Pac-12. USC loses to Stanford 41-31 in a game that was a back-and-forth game, but Hogan for Stanford decided he wanted to come out and play. Ladies and gentlemen, he came out, had a fantastic game. Especially after a week, or the past couple weeks, he hasn't been as noticeable. You notice in the game against Northwestern, he didn't play well, and they lost to Northwestern. I was expecting to see more out of USC, but it turns out their defense isn't as good as we all thought it was going to be this season. And really, there wasn't as much offensive cohesion as we would have liked to see out of a team with a returning starting quarterback in Cody Kessler. So we'll have to see what USC does to rebound here in the future. In the next couple of weeks, Stanford might be still in the race for the Pac-12 North and a chance to get into the Pac-12 title game with this win. But we'll see how that goes going down further. Let's go into our next segment here. Big wins for a few teams. UCLA played BYU this past weekend, and BYU was on a roll. They got a couple of huge wins the past few weeks, and came in, played UCLA. UCLA had one of those weeks where we didn't get the best out of their freshman quarterback, but they still managed to get enough to beat BYU 24-23. Which is kind of sad for BYU. They're one of those teams you were hoping might be able to crack the code and get into the top 4 by the end of the season. They had the strength of schedule to do it, but without a undefeated season, I don't think they will have the opportunity to be selected in that top 4, even if they run the table the rest of the way. They do have a huge game against Michigan this coming week. We will get back to that. UCLA is really showing them, or starting to assert themselves as the best team in the Pac-12 South, with USC losing. You'll also have to see if they will beat the likes of Arizona and Utah, who have had great defenses in the past. Utah has had one of the more intriguing defenses in terms of stats this season, but UCLA, it's looking like they're going to be a Pac-12 South representative in the Pac-12 championship, and they're going to keep rolling probably into a top 4 spot. But once again, this changes week to week, so who knows, I might be backtracking on that later. However, Another great result. Oh, speaking of, I should also bring this up. Perkins for UCLA had 26 carries, 219 yards, and a touchdown. Great performance out of their running back. Another great game, I brought it up last week, Northwestern and Duke. It turned out to be a fun matchup. Northwestern comes out on top after just getting themselves into the top 25 of the rankings in the AP polls nationally. They beat Duke 19-10. Fantastic game for Northwestern. They're continuing to roll. They might even turn into a team to definitely watch in the Big Ten this season to fight for a, not Michigan State, not Ohio State, but possibly one of the top 3 teams in the Big Ten, especially with Wisconsin not showing much this season. And who knows with Michigan this season. Another great game this past week, Georgia Tech and Notre Dame. And what was a doozy, Notre Dame beats Georgia Tech 30-22. Notre Dame with their backup quarterback pulls out another win. Notre Dame's looking like they're going to be a team that's going to be definitely pushing for one of those top playoff spots this year, even with their backup quarterback. We'll have to see how that ends up going, but they are in fact turning into one of the best teams in the nation. And they continue to develop here, beating a Georgia Tech team in a triple option offense that was rolling on all cylinders for the first couple of weeks. So we will have to see what happens to Georgia Tech after this, if they're going to continue to push forward and be ACC contenders with the likes of Florida State and Clemson, or if they're going to fall back in the pack and maybe get 8 wins this season. Another great game and a big win from this past weekend. Ole Miss. Ole frickin' Miss beats Alabama. Now, the score is closer than you think, but Ole Miss really kind of beat up on Alabama in a lot of ways. Score ended up being 43-37. Alabama gave up some yards. Tell you what, Chad Kelly for Ole Miss was 18-33, 341 yards and 3 touchdowns. What's happened to Alabama? Saban's kind of losing his edge, and so are his recruits. We'll have to see where they end up at the end of the season, because if they're losing Ole Miss, there's at least 2 or 3 more roadblocks on their schedule with the likes of LSU and such. So we will have to figure out what's up with them, and they're going to have to get a better sense of who they are. Lane Kiffin as offensive coordinator put up a few points here, but I mean, really, their defense was nothing to be fond of whatsoever. But Ole Miss, watch out for Ole Miss to possibly contend for the SEC championship this year. They are really, they have a bunch of returning defensive players that are impressive. So definitely watch out for Ole Miss this season. Some questionable games. Questionable games, new segment for me this particular week. Basically, what it is, it's big name teams that had really close results, and you're wondering why they did. Ohio State only beats Northern Illinois 20-13. Cardale Jones doesn't even throw over 100 yards. Luckily, Ezekiel Elliott still put in a 100-yard performance. One week you think Ohio State's the best team in the nation, the next week you're not really sure. Yes, Northern Illinois is a very well-coached team out of the MAC, but Ohio State really has to do better. They got a game against Western Michigan coming up, and Western Michigan gave Michigan State problems. So, Ohio State, figure your stuff out. Another game, Florida State only put up 14 points on Boston College last Thursday, I believe. And Boston College didn't score. I mean, it's a great shutout for the Florida State defense, but come on, Florida State, figure out your offensive game. It's kind of, maybe it's just a blip on the radar, but you really should be beating Boston College by more than that. In another questionable game, Clemson against a team that can seem to win, but can seem to get close results and show you that they may not be as good as they are. Louisville. Clemson beats Louisville 20-17. Louisville kind of showed how bad Auburn was playing. We may actually get the same kind of thought process with how Clemson is playing right now. Clemson better figure things out if they're going to be playing really well here in the ACC. Alright, so my top 10 teams. And with my new editing program, you'll be able to see my top 10 teams. Probably over this shoulder somewhere. But our top 10 teams for this week, I have Ohio State at number 1. I have Ole Miss at number 2, making a big jump with their big win over Alabama this past week. I have Michigan State right now at 3. They continue to roll. I have TCU at 4. They dropped a couple of places, or at least one place. I have Baylor at 5. I have LSU at 6, jumping up with their huge win over Auburn. Yeah, Auburn wasn't playing well, but Fournette is just on a different level right now. So definitely keep an eye out for him in the Heisman race. At 7, I have UCLA. I already mentioned a bunch about them. I have Georgia at 8, who continue to roll this past week. They look to be a force in the SEC. I have Notre Dame at 9. They had a big win at Georgia Tech, and I did drop them a couple places, but there were so many decent results this week that it was really hard to figure out where I wanted to keep them. And then at number 10, I have Oregon, who rolled over a Georgia State team, and, you know, with their backup quarterback, still some things where Georgia State threw the ball all over them, but Oregon still was able to capitalize on some created turnovers. So I'm not really sure if Oregon deserves to move up yet or not. This game coming up against Utah will be a big thing, and I will bring that up here in just a moment. What to watch this coming week, and I will be posting these up here so you can see them. Georgia Tech plays Duke in an ACC showdown. Duke will either put up or shut up. Duke, the past few years, has been a pretty strong team in the ACC and gotten themselves to a couple of bowl games. So we'll have to see how Duke does. Another game, BYU at Michigan. BYU, after a tough loss to UCLA, looking to come into the big house and hopefully upset Jim Harbaugh's day and make Jim Harbaugh 0-2 against teams from Utah this year. Also, big match in the Big 12. And no, it is not a Texas Longhorn team I'm bringing up. It is TCU versus Texas. This will be one of TCU's bigger matchups of this season. Texas Tech, though playing against some weaker competition, are at 3-0 already, and so is TCU. So this is a good undefeated matchup for the Big 12. Coming in the Pac-12 with these last three, UCLA is playing Arizona in what will be a huge matchup. UCLA, once again, playing what should be a ranked foe, and they are, in fact, looking to see if their quarterback will continue his strong play or if he will struggle against Scooby Wright, hopefully coming back for this game. Don't quote me on that, for Arizona, and we'll see how Solomon and them do at Arizona. If Arizona wins this game, they push themselves to possibly win the Pac-12 South. If UCLA wins, it's just fortifying their case. Also, in the Pac-12, USC is playing Arizona State. Arizona State's looking to bounce back. Yes, they did, I believe, get a win last week, but it's still bouncing back from their loss to Texas A&M. So they'll be able to prove themselves, hopefully, against this USC squad. Also for USC, how are they going to do going forward? This is one of those matches where it's kind of a gut check. Arizona State has talent. USC needs to stop that talent, and hopefully it'll be a solid result for them as well. Also, Oregon versus Utah this coming weekend. The Ducks got to figure out what they're doing. Utah has a strong defense. Hopefully Vernon Adams for Oregon is coming back strong. If not, Jeff Locke will be there. But if Utah figures out a few things on offense, this may be a rough game for Oregon. But the problem is Utah still hasn't figured anything out on offense. They've won games, though. They've definitely won games. It's been their defense that's been doing it for them. Some sneaky good games for this coming week. Yes, this is a long video. These sneaky good games. Watch out for Maryland versus West Virginia. Watch out for Ohio versus Minnesota. Ohio out of the MAC playing really well, and they're currently undefeated. Watch for them to be hitting a pretty big bowl game, or at least their top bowl game this season. We have Oklahoma State playing Texas. Will Texas bounce back after their loss to Cal last week? Virginia Tech playing ECU. Eastern Carolina loves to get hyped up for these games against Virginia schools. So watch out for Virginia Tech ECU. Out of the Pac-12, Cal plays Washington. Cal is going to try to make a case for them to be ranked coming into next week. So we shall see how they play. Washington needs to figure out what they're doing under Chris Peterson and show some better effort. Also, in the SEC, my one SEC game to watch this coming week, Mississippi State and Auburn. A matchup of futility. Who shall come out and respond after their disappointing couple of weeks? Will it be Mississippi State? Will it be Auburn? I'm going with Mississippi State more than likely. But who knows? Maybe Gus Malzahn will bring Auburn out from the depths to a better result. Anywho, I have rambled on long enough. Thank you for watching. I am the analyst at the Analyst32. This has been the College Football Special. Thank you for watching, and have a great college football weekend.